Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. It's Ukraine War Update Extra video, giving the extra tidbits and nuggets to get your teeth into to give you greater understanding of the war in Ukraine. I have White Governor. I have recently recorded a much larger extra video, but I chopped it up to do the North Korean munitions export one, and so most of this video is going to be what I've previously recorded, which is why I'll have a sudden change of clothes. I'm not Princess Diana and I don't have an outfit for every occasion, but occasionally do get changed. So that will explain that. I'm just going to start with this I don't know, little icebreaker, I guess, or should I say a helmet breaker. This is a Ukrainian helmet, a little worse for wear. But my goodness, one assumes that soldier was very, very grateful for a helmet that worked. I'd be interested to see what the difference between the helmets are. I know both sides have some stocks of very old helmets going back an awful long time. I wonder whether there's been any stories of like this of helmets, particularly more modern, more capable helmets, doing fantastic jobs in keeping people alive. Anyway, that was just the icebreaker. Now on to what I had for you previously. It's not going to be a hugely long video today. You'll be thankful to know. And always, please, always, someone was complaining earlier saying, you know, mate, get to the point. Put me on 1.5. I listen to myself. If I have to listen back for kind of different reasons, I put myself on 1.75 times speed. Go to the cog, adjust the speed, and you'll get used to hearing me speak more quickly. Start on 1.25, move to 1.5, 1.75. I listen to all my YouTube videos on either 2 times speed or 1.75 times speed, and the same with podcasts and books. When I listen to any content now, I've just got used to being able to pick out stuff by training myself, and it saves an awful lot of time. So please listen to me speak a lot more quickly than I do. And it also cuts out the ums and ahs and all those kind of things that get in the way of nice, smooth flow of talking. Anyway, take care and speak soon. Toodle pips. Where should we go to first? Well, another Chris Owicki thread. Here he refers to this chap, Solonko1648, as he's known as, that's his handle. I can't read his actual name. Communication specialist and soldier in the armed forces of Ukraine. He's a serving Ukrainian soldier who's published an excellent pair of threads in Ukrainian describing how the Russian system of trenches and firing positions works. It's a very helpful insight to why they're being so difficult to overcome. And here Chris Owicki then goes through the thread and translates it, so we'll dip into this. He focuses on a Russian fortified position between the villages of Robotyne and Novoprokopivka, through which the road from one village to the other runs. Tokmak lies further along the same road, which is currently contested. The road being contested. The following thread translates his description. So remember, I talk about this alien head there. It's that little sort of circular thing. There are actually other trench lines coming out the top, like a pair of aerials, so on and so forth. So this has been a notoriously difficult place for the Ukrainians to take control of. As he says, so this is the original. This is the Ukrainian chap talking here. So this, dear friends, is one of the most difficult strongholds located in the Robotyne and Novoprokopivka area, a complex system of trenches and tunnels, dugouts, and firing positions to which the Russian invaders cling with all their might. What we see first, a system of trenches and firing positions. From observation and tracking of the movements of the occupied equipment and personnel, we confirm movement and approach routes to the position. In general, these routes should be obvious, but of course, all the data should be studied and the information verified. This is why this is a formal process. Next, we see from above how these positions are equipped. We see overlapping dugouts. So you can see these trench networks are difficult. You have tree lines with these. These have got, mounds as well as trenches and firing positions, often revetments. They might be crossing over with each other, so it's kind of supporting each other. You get enflading fire and all sorts. These are complex places to take, and obviously with Russian drones operating, they would, you would hope, or the Russians would hope, they'd have artillery support as well as even the drones dropping IEDs. You can see all the pockmarks here, the number of shells that have been peppered around here. But yeah, difficult already. You can imagine it being difficult already. But that's not all, he says. Some of the trenches are covered over for a long distance. So that makes them tunnels, basically. They may not be tunnels in a classical sense, but technically they are. This is actually a trench tunnel designed to hide the number of personnel and the movements in the trenches. So it's not just about protection, but it's about not letting the enemy know how many people are there. If you don't know how many people are there, you can't properly commit the requisite number of resources, both in terms of shelling and or distance ordnance, as well as troops, if you're going to take it over. If you don't know how many people are there, as opposed to any other given place, then you're not quite sure how many troops you're going to need to take it. This is actually a trench tunnel designed to hide the number of personnel and the movements in the trenches as well. With the help of aerial reconnaissance, we determine not only which route the occupiers take to enter or leave, we also identify the entrances and exits of this stronghold or trench system. And a little more about the tunnels. According to soldiers of the frontline units, there is a classic tunnel here. It's under the road and leads from Robotyne to Novoprokopivka. It connects both flanks of this system. In other words, let's go and look on. Let's actually look at Andrew Perpetua's map, only because it's got the easiest one to look at with an autocomplete there. So here is the Robotyne to Novoprokopivka road, and we can turn on the fortifications as well to give you an idea of those lines. This is the exact place we're talking about, and may well be this trench line itself, or may well be somewhere between there and Novoprokopivka. But there are tunnels going from one flank to the other completely under the ground, and that just makes everything so very difficult. Moreover, we also know that the dugouts have been dug there, which actually have a second underground floor going deep into the ground. While we are waiting for the shells, the occupiers are digging, and they dug long and deep. In other words, that period of waiting for equipment, most of that being ammunition to stockpile for this counter-offensive, the Russians were building themselves the ability to mitigate the very ammunition the Ukrainians were waiting for. So the Russians are digging down and making the shells all the less useful. So after fierce fighting and artillery shelling, our artillery opened the dugouts and covered trenches. After that, it became clear how much more difficult the task was. Furthermore, in the area where the main entrance to these positions is located from the west, it is only after a dense artillery barrage that the untrained eye will become aware of how well some of the trench tunnels on this side were camouflaged. You just can't, you can see some of these ones out in the open. You can't necessarily see them in a tree line. And actually, Tatargami's thread the other day was broadly about this, about how difficult it is to take this ground when it is absolutely, crisscrossed with defenses. So the occupiers successfully used the forest belt to prepare and to camouflage these positions. Such positions require us to conduct very thorough and vigilant reconnaissance. The occupiers know what we are interested in and try to prevent us from conducting it properly. If you watch the process you can watch the process in this video. So unfortunately, it doesn't have the translations. I'll turn the sound off, but you can see that's the alien's head actually. So these are the two antennae coming out the top. That's it. This is south towards Novoprokopivka. That's Novoprokopivka, and this is sort of north to Robotyne. So that is exactly here. The drone is up in the sky looking this way in the direction of the blue arrow, and that's the alien's head with and I've said before it's got two aerials coming out the top. Well, that is the one. Okay, so let's watch this video then. And yeah, there's that alien's head, two lines there, but it's the tree lines as well, right? So you've got the entrance and exits to these not easily seen. They are camouflaged. I don't know what that is saying, but people probably, soldiers walking to and from the these defenses, and where you keep an eye on them, see how they get in and how they get out. And as you can see here, going into this area and then suddenly disappear, which is to say there is a tunnel. It appears going under there. So, yep, you can try and hit that with artillery, but exactly how much damage does this artillery do? And this is why you need things like the Russians use the FOB 500s or 1500s. Here, you really need something like JDAMs to really have better effect on these trench lines. And even then, you're wondering how deep they go and what's because you use JDAM, and that will destroy one area here. But unless you're going to have enough JDAMs to just completely flatten the entire area, then I don't know there's as much point. But you can imagine certainly those cluster munitions aren't even going to touch the sides. These trench systems, they would be the wrong sort of munition to use. Anyway, to continue, now I will talk about the eastern part of the fortification. So that is probably this area over here. So we've got the alien head there. That's what you can allow me to call it. This is the eastern part over there, but we are north at the bottom, south at the top. Okay, so it is not so much a separate fortified point as part of an extensive system, overcoming which was an extremely difficult task, taking into account the features of the hostilities, the terrain and the ratio of forces and means that I talked about. The two main parts of the fortifications are connected by an underground tunnel under the road. This way the road is controlled and still used for its intended purpose. So there you can see the road, and there are tunnels going underneath the road connecting one side to other. Anyway, note that the shape of the trench in front of the forest plantation, except for the area near the road, we have already seen a similar structure in the defensive line that stretched northwest of Verbove. There you got your classic zigzags, and one of the reasons why you have these zigzags, you can have covering fire can be quite useful, but also it's much more difficult for say a plane to just run down the length of the trench and just drop bombs and they all fill the same trench. You just get the same line down there, bomb, and it destroys the entire trench. If it's zigzagged, it's much more difficult to achieve the same end. And note another example of the use of terrain. The system of fortification uses the plantation to cover the entrance and exit. There are also fortifications in the rear. A circular defense pattern is observed. So you've got zigzags here, you've got all sorts of other stuff going on. You've got some kind of circular patterns, it looks like, is the claim here. And yeah, the problem is you really can't tell what's going on in there and how much how many fortifications they have in that area. But extensive underground passages seem to be used, and yeah, there you can see just a few more elements of that. But yeah, here too, the artillery of the armed forces of Ukraine performed the task of opening the trenches built in the style of tunnels. A similar picture could be seen in the western part of these fortifications on the other side of the road, which I analysed earlier, he says. Also note the layout of the trenches closer to the road. Imagine what it would be like to storm or clear them. Another sceptical remark of the adherence of elastic defence. No one was going to leave here even to return. They clung to this stronghold with all their might. So the elastic defence is the idea that, and we've seen this a lot, we've seen the idea that they lose some ground and then they re-attack it, they counter-attack it to take it back, they lose it again, you get this back and forward, and the end result is actually some kind of broad stability with these up and down notions of control. But here it's like, no, you don't lose it, because you lose it once, you lose this because it's such a good fortified position. It's not one of these that would lend itself to that kind of elastic defense, so they defend it with all their might. And then there's And then there's the wormhole, another reminder that some people like to call the Russian invaders worms. Well, that's a bit of a dig there, which is what worms do. So there you go. So that is just a little bit of an insight into how difficult these areas are to take. I mean, you can imagine trying to take these places with troops, but then with your armored vehicles, when these have clear line of sight, it's flat ground here. So if you're charging at these trench lines with vehicles and a pack full of troops, because you can't walk your troops from there to there, because they'll just be seen by the Russians, and then just be hammered by the machine gun posts, and calling in drones and artillery and whatever. So you need to get there quickly. You need to hammer these places with artillery until you're close enough and the artillery stops. But then really, you're going to be back here by the time the artillery stops. You're going to want to drive them closer because that's the quickest way of getting there. But then these vehicles are just open to ATGM strikes from all over the shop. And it's a kill box. And so that is why it has taken the Ukrainians this long to take what might seem really small trench lines in the whole scheme of everything in Ukraine, right? This is just one field's worth of trench lines, or a couple of fields worth of trench lines, right? And yet that has taken them, that took them a good couple of weeks to take, because it's massively attritional to do so if you don't have air support. So what you want to do is slam down, as I keep saying, bring in your A-10s, whack a load of heavy munitions down here, ordnance down here, blow this up big time, and then you can walk in. But you can't do that because A-10s can't operate in contested airspace. The best you can do is hope that JDAMs can do some damage being fired from over here, but the same can be said for the Russians, who can just fire them back at you. In fact, they can do a better job with their FAB 500s, which is why we have Russian Russian airstrike. Russian airstrike. That's what the Russians are doing. The Ukrainians are having less success in doing so. MRL shelling, that's interesting, just a complete aside, that we now, this is how we know that the Ukrainians control this now, is that the Russians are doing their own shelling of that area. But nonetheless, that was, I think, an interesting set of imagery to really illustrate how difficult the Ukrainians have got it. Right, we're going to move to a Trentelenko thread. I'm not going to go through it all. It's a bit sort of geeky in some sense, but just the general point is, I think, really pertinent. Note the following. 1, AFU thermal night vision drone. So he said, check this video out, right? And he's like, night vision drone taking out a whole bunch of Russian troops. He says, okay, well, let's think about this a little bit. 3 grenades were dropped. 7 out of 11 of the Russian soldiers were casualties. There were 0 Ukrainian losses. This is a really good use of tech, of resources in general, of your own troops. You have a ratio of 0 to maybe 7 casualties, right? So 0 Ukrainian casualties, 7 Russian. So that's really good. Okay, how did it happen? Well, the drone that did it likely cost below $10,000. Drone economic barriers to entry thread. Here. Okay, the reason I say that is because you can find on Amazon.com a thermal imaging camera for an iPhone for $299. Does anyone doubt something like that could be MacGyvered onto a drone, given that video? These are video frame captures from 1991 nighttime bomb drops by F-111F. So these are US airplanes, no doubt, using first generation thermal images in a PAVE TAC pod. The link has the video these photo captures came from. So these are just thermal images from 1991. The AVQ-26 PAVE TAC pods weighing some 1,385 pounds, that's 629 kilograms, and measuring 166 inches or 4,220 millimeters in length. It was not cheap. Only 150 were made, and only 2 were carried on every 7 or F-111Fs. These are the PAVE TAC pods. Huge. And this thread is to say, look how far we've come. Because you compare that to a little iPod. Oops, no, that's probably not the best way to look at that. A little iPhone thermal camera, and that is a significant difference in terms of money and in terms of weight and dimensions. As ever, AirPower Australia has a crackerjack piece on the PaveTac. PaveTac cost in the 7-figure of dollars. The 2023 thermal on that drone cost 3 figures. The difference between $100 and $1 million is 4 orders of magnitude, or actually it's 10,000 times 4 orders. 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000. So 10,000 orders times greater. That's 4 orders of magnitude. That's serious stuff. And yes, the drone thermal is much shorter range than the PaveTac thermal images, but it doesn't come in a pod weighing as much as it does, and we're as large as it was. So it weighs a few hundred grams, is uncooled, and needs very little electric power. The drone thermal imager is an uncooled microbolometer imaging array. The principal disadvantage of the uncooled microbolometer thermal images over the traditional quantum detector images is that they are noisier and as a result less sensitive. The measure used by engineers for sensitivity is the noise equivalent temperature difference. Turns out I am going to read this whole thread. NETD, approximately the smallest temperature change that can be detected in the source of thermal radiation. NETD performance matters a lot if the target is smaller than a pixel. In the imaging array like that of the F111 PaveTac pod, for something like the AFU drone, it's less important because the target subtends multiple pixels. So uncooled microbolometer arrays work well for short-range imaging applications like drones and rifle scopes. The Bright Night system by Elta in Israel uses 6 fixed microbolometer staring thermal imaging sensors to produce the segmented wide field of view sensor covering 220 by 90 degrees. Image is projected onto the pilot's visor and digitally stitched and windowed into the display. That's pretty clever, right? The head slew rate limited by the pilot's helmet mounted sensors only, so it senses sensors only, so is very quick. The inspiration for Elta's Bright Night was either the USAF Gorgon Stare used on the MQ-9 Reaper or the DARPA Gigapixel Imager sensors. I have no idea what he's talking about. One of the notable features of the 2014-15 Donbass War was the large-scale use of cheap microbolometer thermal images, be it monocular handheld devices or rifle scopes, the latter adaptable to other purposes such as telescopic gun sights for cannons, ATGWs, etc. There was a reason for this. Uncooled microbolometer thermal images are not on the International Trafficking in Armaments (ITAR) regulated technology list because of that poor pixel NETD sensitivity performance that was used to define what thermal tech was. So in other words, like the better the imager, the more likely it is to be sanctioned because it has very particular applications for military use. So yeah, you can get better images, but you need to make them much bigger and heavier so that there aren't all these mitigating factors to the work they're doing. But actually, if you're just trying to hit some people moving in a forest strip or something, then actually that iPhone or iPad imager is perfectly viable. What these developments mean together is that the West no longer owns the night because every military in the world can afford the combination of cheap thermal sensors that are light enough for cheap small drones. Drones always capable of getting close enough for those sensors. Imagine M1 Abrams tanks in situations like this, but through a small drone, uncooled microbolometer thermal imagery digital video. War has changed. Western militaries haven't. In other words, we are seeing the application of cheap but really good quality stuff that has great application or good enough quality for what they need application to make battlefields a very different place now than they used to be. This is becoming, someone said this morning on one of my threads, looking at the Andrew Perpetua. In fact, let's go and check out Andrew's Twitter handle and look at exactly what the guy said on my thread. Sorry, I can't remember who it was, but said basically looking at the cause of all the destruction of these pieces of kit, virtually all of them, or a massively significant proportion of them, are drones. All of these massive bits of kit, apart from, look, a gimlet strike, some shelling, shelling question mark, don't really know. But other than that, drone. We are arguably in a drone war. And when you can attach thermal imaging, cheap thermal imaging to those drones and use them to strike things at night, then you have a very deadly concoction of weaponry that you can rely on. That is doing the military work remotely. You're not going to lose people doing it. You are sending up bits of kit that are relatively cheap, expendable, or even not expendable. Maybe you can get the drones back, and especially at night, they're unlikely to be hit. Go and drop their IEDs. They're not kamikaze. They're not loitering munitions, so they go and drop their load and then bring them back. Job done. Use them again. So quite incredible. And you know, you start seeing footage like this. So this is another piece of night footage that I don't know with this bit of footage, and I can't show all of it to you. But I presume there's the feedback constantly of the drone operator talking to the soldiers. So we have some Ukrainian soldiers coming into this trench system at night with the drone operator being the eyes in the sky for these guys. There are munitions that explode here. These guys go around shooting stuff. Sorry, there's nothing inappropriate in this, but they're going around doing this stuff. And then later on, we have two Russians who crawl out, and then I can't remember if it's those guys themselves. But what effectively happens is it's at night and they're disorientated, and one Russian, I think, throws a grenade and shoots the other Russian. Throws a grenade out and shoots the other Russian, and the chaos of war, having that at night time, leads to that situation. Of course, for the Ukrainians, they have the advantage in this case. I mean, in other cases, it might be Russians doing that to Ukrainians. It's not necessarily this is, well, Ukrainians can do this, Russians can't. But this footage shows the advantage that is conveyed to the Australians, the Ukrainians, over the Russians. So thermal imagery gives you that advantage and is well used there. So yeah, interesting stuff. Right. Anyway, thank you for watching. Really appreciate that. Thanks for all of your support. I'm going to update my members list, and I need to very specifically thank a bunch of people who have been really, really supportive of the channel. I'll do that, I think, tomorrow. Please check out the live stream I'm doing later tonight.